Sorry about that. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump had earlier dismissed British Prime Minister Keir Starmer's request for a U.S. security guarantee for Ukraine, instead promoting a minerals deal as the key to Ukraine's defense against Russia. In a meeting at the White House on Thursday, Trump stressed that the economic partnership between the U.S. and Ukraine would serve as a sufficient backstop against Russian aggression, while Starmer underscored the importance of a peace agreement that does not reward the aggressor. Trump remained optimistic about reaching a peace deal with Russia soon, although Starmer cautioned against hasty negotiations that could destabilize Europe. The leaders also discussed a potential U.S.-UK trade deal, with Trump suggesting they were close to finalizing an agreement that could eliminate the need for tariffs. Trump reiterated the U.S.'s commitment to NATO's mutual defense, while also signaling support for European peacekeepers in Ukraine if necessary.
We're going to have a very good meeting tomorrow morning. We're going to get along really well, okay? We have a lot of respect. I have a lot of respect for them. We've given them a lot of equipment and a lot of money, but they have fought very bravely, no matter how you figure it. They have really fought. Somebody has to use that equipment, and they have been very brave in that sense.
Mr. President, do you support Article 5 of the NATO treaty? And are you concerned that it might be triggered if European peacekeeping forces end up in Ukraine?
I support it. I don't think we're going to have any reason for it. I think we're going to have a very successful peace, and I think it's going to be a long-lasting peace, and I think it's going to happen hopefully quickly. If it doesn't happen quickly, it may not happen at all. This week I met with President Macron of France, as you know, and held talks with members of the G7. Tomorrow the progress toward peace will continue when President Zelenskyy visits the White House. He'll be here tomorrow in the early part of the day, and we'll be signing a historic agreement that will make the United States a major partner in developing Ukraine's minerals and rare earths and oil and gases, and we have a great understanding. I think it's going to be great for Ukraine. We're going to be at the site, and we'll be digging. We'll be digging. Dig we must. I think there's a very good chance that in the case of these two great friendly countries, I think we could very well end up with a real trade deal where the tariffs wouldn't be necessary. We'll see. But he earned whatever they pay him. He earned today. He was working hard at lunch, and I'm very receptive to it. I think in all fairness, in all seriousness, I think we have a very good chance at arriving at a very good deal. JD?
I felt we had a very productive discussion. Obviously, as the President says, the deal has to come first. But yes, our teams are going to be talking about how we make sure that deal sticks, is lasting and enforced. So our teams will be talking about that. I've been really clear today and previously that I think that European countries, including the United Kingdom, need to step up in our own defence and security. We've been doing that in recent days. You saw the announcement we made on spending just the other day. In addition to that, I've made it clear that the United Kingdom will play its full part in ensuring that if there's a deal, and we hope there is a deal.
And for more on this, we cross now to London to speak with Greg Swenson, a Republican strategist. Greg, glad to have you join us on The World. Maybe we'll start with Starmer, Trump. What's your assessment, or otherwise, of a very good chance of a trade deal where tariffs won't be necessary? That's coming from Trump to reporters on the meeting with Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Trump. What's your assessment? Greg, can you hear me? Greg? It's looking like Greg ain't hearing me. Greg, can you hear me? It's looking like Greg is... Oh, I can hear him. Greg, if you can hear me, I asked you your assessment of a very good chance of a trade deal where tariffs won't be necessary. That is Trump's statement to reporters during his meet with Keir Starmer of UK. All right. We'll get back to that interview when we get Greg on. In the meantime, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is to host a summit on Sunday with more than a dozen European and EU leaders to advance action on Ukraine and security. Now, the summit, which will include leaders from countries such as France, Germany, Italy, and Poland, will focus on strengthening Ukraine's position through continued military support and economic pressure on Russia. Starmer will also hold one-on-one talks with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy before the summit to discuss the ongoing conflict and push for a lasting peace deal with strong security guarantees.
I've spoken to President Zelenskyy a number of times. I spoke to him on Wednesday night as the democratic elected leader in Ukraine. I spoke to him again on Saturday. I have spoken to President Macron this afternoon on his return to France, and I am hosting a number of countries at the weekend for us to continue to discuss how we go forward together as allies in light of the situation that we face.
All right, I gather that Greg is ready. Greg, I'm sure you can hear me now. Glad to have you join us. I did ask you earlier on what you make of Trump's statement saying that what was a very good chance of a trade deal where tariffs won't be necessary. What do you make of that statement coming from Trump?
Yeah, I think it's a great moment for the Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer. I mean, he went to Washington to try to, in some ways, mend fences with President Trump. I think he did a good job of doing that. And also talk about Ukraine. I don't think it was realistic at all to expect President Trump to commit to any sort of security commitment. However, he did indicate that, you know, we're basically on the same team. And then the secondary purpose was to secure a trade deal, or at least discuss a trade deal where there wouldn't be any need for tariffs. And I think he accomplished that, and that was made very clear by the president.
Well, it's interesting that Trump seems to have tempered his comments concerning Zelenskyy, asking, did I really say that, referring to calling Zelenskyy a dictator? Looks like Trump speaking from two sides of his mouth.
Yeah, I think he likes to kid around with people, you know, or joke around. You know, obviously, President Trump was called a dictator by his political opponents in America for years, you know, and you still hear that occasionally from the progressive left. But I think generally speaking, he's just trying to establish a relationship. Sometimes things get a little tense. Sometimes he has to, call out people for what he thinks are behavior that's not welcomed by the administration, but it usually ends up very well. And you saw that with the president of Colombia when President Trump had to threaten him with tariffs, and he immediately, changed his mind and started accepting the illegal migrant returns. So, this is just the way the president works. It's worked for him in the past. I thought yesterday was very diplomatic. Both parties were diplomatic. I thought they got along really well. And I think there'll be some really constructive outcomes for the United Kingdom.
And talking about diplomacy, Keir Starmer's putting his hand in his jacket pocket to bring out a letter from the king inviting Trump to come to the UK, to come to London. That seemed to have worked on Trump.
It did, and that was not a big surprise because the invitation from the king was very well publicized in the week prior to the meeting. However, we didn't know when Keir Starmer would actually deliver that, and I thought he was very wise to deliver it at the beginning of the meeting, and not sort of hold back on it and expect anything in return. So I thought that was really a great way to break the ice and very productive, as it turns out. So President Trump is very fond of the UK. He had a great state visit in 2019, or at least great from our perspective. Maybe not everyone, but this will be the first time a U.S. president has 2 state visits to the United Kingdom. So it's quite historic in many ways.
And then Trump on Putin saying he will keep his word.
Yeah, that's kind of a stretch in the sense that nobody's ever really trusted Putin, and he shouldn't be trusted. And so maybe that's in a way a veiled threat, and he's not been afraid to threaten Putin in the past. So I think that's, look, as Reagan said about the Soviet Union, trust but verify. I think in this case we can maybe even distrust and still verify. So yeah, that's something that will require some, pretty constructive language in any sort of peace agreement or ceasefire agreement. But I do think the president is confident. And remember, there's one big issue here that people forget. It's not just the tilt of focus of American defense and security toward the Pacific, toward China specifically, but also one thing that he and many of the leadership in America right now want to avoid is pushing Russia into a partnership with China. Right now, they're considered the junior partner. They are dependent on China for economic reasons, but also for defense and security. So I think this is a really interesting inflection point where, much like Nixon and Kissinger going to China in the 70s to make sure that China, which at the time was much weaker, would not partner with the Soviet Union. And they wanted to keep that divide in place. And that's a lot of what's going on right now. It's important that we don't force Russia into a partnership. They're both nuclear powers. They both have, in the case of Russia, significant army and military capability. And China, of course, has a significant naval capability, in addition to some economic power as well. So that's not something that we want to see happen. And it's important that the president reaches out to Putin to make sure that there's at least some hope that there's no force or partnership between the two.
At the same time, Putin wants to what he called Western elites trying to undermine our dialogue, and that he will thwart every such attempt.
Yeah, of course, there's a bit of posturing here. This is called negotiations, and I think that Putin is going to have a couple of comments like that, or make a couple of comments like that, maybe draw a line in the sand every once in a while. But look, this is just a negotiation. This is just a process of diplomacy, and I think President Trump is very confident that he could get something done. And as he pointed out in the clip that you showed, if it doesn't happen quickly, it probably doesn't happen. But what I don't think the world wants to see is this stalemate continue. It's very, very unlikely that Ukraine could win this war, win it outright. And so what we're left with is a stalemate where too many young people are dying every day.
All right. Starmer did not take kindly at all to Vance's claim. That is U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, his claim on free speech in the UK, and he made known clearly and stringently to Vance that is totally out of order.
Well, he didn't use those words out of order. All he did was say that the UK or Great Britain has a proud history of free speech, and that much is true. He didn't. I don't think anyone would deny that the history of the United Kingdom is very good for free speech. However, the problem is recently, and in that respect, J.D. Vance is absolutely right. The United Kingdom has abandoned their proud tradition of freedom of speech, and they're using the terms, harmful content to police views and opinions that are not consistent with the government's, and that should be worrisome for anybody. And look, I'm not suggesting that the U.S. is perfect. We experienced a real threat to freedom of speech. We saw censorship in the last 5 years in the U.S. with the government working with social media companies to prohibit speech that they didn't agree with. For example, around any criticism of the COVID lockdowns or vaccine mandates, we're basically precluded from appearing on social media and much of the mainstream media. So, we've seen that in the U.S. We're glad it's over. President Trump is very committed to freedom of speech. As you heard from J.D. Vance in Munich 2 weeks ago today, there's some valid criticisms of what's going on in Europe and specifically in the United Kingdom.
Well, the point that Starmer was trying to make, you can be in your country and come and run my country for me. So he said they've had it for a very long time, and it will still be there. All right, thank you so much, Greg Swenson.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you, yeah.